Welcome to the first session of Oral History Compilation by Ranbir Singh Archive. Ranbir Singh Archive is a collective initiative and is making an attempt to probe deeper into the life of lesser known freedom fighters and to research the facets of history most important to us as a nation. We are bringing out the aspects of sacrifice, what it once meant, surfacing the buried stories of freedom fighters to inspire the next generations to feel responsible, to take initiative, and then to learn to live with dignity. Oral History Compilation is a series of sessions exploring the invaluable and probably soon to be lost aspects of history. We are commemorating each and every member of the Hindustan Socialistic Republican Association. Today, we're going to discover some hidden stories, facts, and truths behind the great freedom struggle of India. Let us start this series by remembering a vigorous mind and a fierce intellect, our very own Shaheed Bhagat Singh. With us today, we have Professor Jagmohan Ji. Professor Jagmohan Singh has devoted his life to keeping the memory and the message of his uncle, Shaheed Bhagat Singh, alive. Currently the director of the Shaheed Bhagat Singh Creativity Center in Ludhiana. He also happens to be an alumni of the IIT Kharagpur and has retired as the head of computer sciences at the Punjab Agricultural University. Welcome, Professor Jagmohan Ji. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much, Leher, and thank you for the Ranbir Singh archives, because I remember Ranbir Singh was one of the co-patriot with Bhagat Singh to have established Naujawan Bharat Sabha and then Student Union. And also he was a motivator. And it is a great opportunity to record in his archives some of the memories of and what we know about that group, which is Hindustan Socialist Republican Association, Naujawan Bharat Sabha, and such other organizations which work tirelessly to bring revolutionary passion at that time.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I think we need to thank Anand for having, thought of this wonderful initiative and for having and for doing this. So, Bhagat Singh has this entire aura around him. The moment that you mention the name of Bhagat Singh, people become very passionate. Everyone remembers revolution, the freedom struggle. His name is associated with a lot of things. But there are also a lot of myths and stories surrounding Shaheed Bhagat Singh. And a lot of mysteries as well. There are a lot of unanswered questions. There are a lot of things that people are extremely curious about. So we've tried to, put together a list of such questions. And I'm going to be asking you some of those questions. And then we'll get to the more serious stuff. So let's begin with the correct birth date of Bhagat Singh. For example, if you search on the internet, it usually comes up with two dates that are the 27th and the 28th of September, 1907. So we would like to know from you that which one is the authentic birth date?
Authentic day is 13th Asu, Tera Asu, that is 13th of Asun. 1907 is a economy, but that falls on Saturday, and that comes down to 28th September 1907. This error, actually, I wanted to know how this error got, because the very first book, which was published by Punjabi University by Mr. Deol, though he mentions the family record as that is in a that Desi calendar, but while interpreting it, he made it 27. And somehow that error the university never corrected, and that started. And our internet is such a pond that once the fish is left into it, it goes on circulating, and corrections are hard to do. But we finally convinced the Indian government records that it is 28th September 1907, and that is which is now being celebrated everywhere. But still, that confusion and we will take steps to correct it in the Wikipedia or other documents if ever we come to know about that. So that is the real date of birth is 28 September, and I add it more. He was born at 9 a.m. in the morning on
Okay.
Saturday. On Saturday.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful. I think it's really sad, that there's so much confusion regarding his birth date. Such a hero, of the freedom movement for India. Okay, so Professor Jagmohan, there is, this incident that happened on the 4th of February in 1922 at the Chauri Chaura, where Mr. M.K. Gandhi withdrew the non-cooperation movement. Now, at this time, I believe that Bhagat Singh was only 15 years old and Chandrasekhar Azad was about 16 years old. What psychological effect do you feel would this withdrawal of the movement have had on, the young minds of our future revolutionaries? And do you feel that they could have probably felt a sense of betrayal at the time?
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting question, but we have to go a little in the past of 22, because why Gandhiji started that non-cooperation movement? Because after Jallianwala Bagh, there was for about 2 months, there was a military rule and lot of punishments, and to the extent that at Gujranwala, there was bombing which took place by aeroplane on common marriage party. They hanged young men and others in the public. And so that was the whole movement. And this was recorded by Gandhiji along with the C.R. Das, Motilal Nehru, and others. And he traveled in Punjab. That was his first interaction after Jallianwala Bagh, that what was happening there. So he was perturbed that a Punjab with so much bravery has been given that much violence by the state. How would they react back? So he wanted that we must channelize that energy. So there was that the most important part of that non-cooperation was a call to the students. And I actually discovered that call which he gave, because that influenced all these young men to join him first, because later part comes on that. And that call was in Benares, because he was along with Malviya ji, Madan Mohan Malviya, who was the established BHU. He said that I came to India and I thought I will spend all my life sitting at the feet of Malviya ji to serve the country. But now we are at two different points. Malviya ji says that young men should be dedicated to their studies so that they can find job and help their families. But I say, Gandhi say, I say that you should not only leave your government jobs or the courts and the schools and colleges, so that you have a much bigger family, the India, and you serve for India's freedom. So that was the call. And I think because all these revolutionaries actually responded to that call very strongly. And one of the interesting thing is that Chandrasekhar Azad, Rajguru, Manmat Gupta, all of them were students at Banaras, and they came out in the call. And the very first punishment which has been given to the Chandrasekhar Azad was 14 lashes, because he participated in the Satyagraha movement. And but that was very interesting, because he was so courageous that he bore that 14 lashes and walked on his own feet, throwing the 4 annas money, which was being given after you lash the person, then they will give some money that you go and drink hot milk. But he threw that on the jailer's face and walked. And that evening, the whole Banaras was on their feet with Chandrasekhar Azad. The very first photograph we have is of Chandrasekhar Azad standing with the charkha as a young boy of 14. So that was the call to which these young peoples responded. And naturally, because of this Chora Chori, and let us also understand what this Chora Chori was, because police actually first fired on the non-cooperation satyagrahis. They killed people. So then the whole mass of the people, well, followed or virtually pushed the police, and they took refuge in their police station. And that police station was burnt. But in that one, well, then Gandhiji thought that it is going beyond control, so he withdrew. Though there was differences within the Congress leaders also, Lala Lajpat Rai was writing from the jail, and the argument given by Mahatma Gandhi was that you are civilly dead because you are in the jail, so you cannot talk about the matters outside the jail. So that was the argument used, and this definitely brought a bigger question, that why this failed. Bhagat Singh's response was a bit different, because it is the same time when Ireland got its independence, or what we call the Dominion status, in 1921. Bhagat Singh said that with all that enthusiasm which has been generated by Mahatma Gandhi's call, and after a lot of sacrifices, that people left their schools, left their courts, and they left their government jobs. So all that which has been with so much sacrifice, why we could not achieve. So the very first book which Bhagat Singh translates into Hindi is My Fight for Irish Freedom by Dan Breen. So that book virtually, and he wanted not only read himself, but he wanted his colleagues in the Uttar Pradesh and other who could have only access to Hindi, that they could understand what are the principles or what are the powers which are used by the Ireland to become successful. So that was the one learning lesson out of it. The second was that then, because they were out of school, they wanted, and Gandhiji advised them that you young men go back to the colleges or schools and study. So then there was a question raised by them, that why we have left that, and why should we now go back to that, because we rejected, you ask us to reject that education system, so it is not possible for us to go back. And then national colleges were established. So these young people then joined that national colleges, and Bhagat Singh had an opportunity, and he left his studies when he was not completed his matric. So there was a question that how could he join the national college, because college you can join after if you have passed the matric. And then a special test was arranged for him, and he was given a 1 month time to prepare for examination, and if he passes that test, he will be allowed to join. But he says that was the time I worked hard to achieve my aim to joining the national college. So this was a positively response. Well, Gandhiji's initiative, and then virtually there was a kind of debate. Well, it is more of a dialogue, that they always started discussing, questioning the past and learning for the future action. So it has to be taken in that whole sum, that this Chora Chori issue definitely gave rise to a revolutionary passion and thinking and learning. And that's when Bhagat Singh says that it became almost passion for me to study, so that every argument of the enemy can be countered by a counter argument. And that is, I think, a revolutionary change which came out of that.
Okay. So, Professor Jagmohan, after Gandhiji disbanded the non-cooperation movement, there were also these riots that broke out. There were Hindu-Muslim riots. And do you feel that, Bhagat Singh became an atheist because of that? Did it have any role to play in his becoming an atheist?
No, it is much important than before he became atheist. Actually, after that, Gandhiji was arrested, and as soon as he is arrested, the British agent starts this communal rights. There is a very interesting letter by Motilal Nehru to his son Jawaharlal Nehru that we are so astonished that in our villages there was not communal strife, but now it has percolated into the villages. And that is why in 1924, Bhagat Singh and his all comrades, Ranbir and Yash and Bhagwati Charan, Sukhdev, Yashpal, they established a Naujawan movement, the Naujawan Bharat Sabha, on four pillars. The basis was that first is that out of the young minds, the communalism must be washed out. They should be convinced that there is the divisiveness of casteism is a bad thing, and the third point was that they must develop a kind of scientific attitude which allows them to understand everything by its cause, because once they have understand the cause of the thing, the solution can follow. And the fourth dimension was very interesting, because he said that virtually why we want to replace the British rule, and that was because there was utter inequality, as it has been mentioned in their manifesto of Naujawan Bharat Sabha, that it was that inequality and the struggle for Swaraj and Swadeshi is for 99% people by the total participation of 99%. And that is and it is interesting to note that today the same inequality exists as observed by Mr. Piketty, who is a French economist working on the inequality in the world with the history of it. And he says whatever inequality was in the 20th decade of 1920s is the same level as India reached back in 2016. So that means this is we are reaching 100th year of the formation of a youth movement. And it is to be noted that was the approach, because once the problem came, they were serious about it. And I think that communication, and Gandhiji were at time talking about it, but they were trying to find a serious scientific solution to the problems. And that was the response. And that is why we find a lot of his articles on communal question, as well as on the casteism. Ashut ka Swal, the question of untouchability, then how do we solve the problem of communalism? So the focus became along with and then they were trying to find out the cause, why it is taking place. And that is it. They say that our struggle is two-faced. One is against our own weaknesses of the society, because you can only progress if the society is united. And the enemy tries to divide it. And that was the real issues on which they started building up their next experience of revolutionary party.
Right. So you spoke about the Jallianwala incident as well, which happened in Amritsar. And I believe that Bhagat Singh was still in school when it happened. He was just about 12 years old.
Yeah.
And it is rumored that, he immediately left his school premises and he rushed to the location of the massacre. And there is this story, that goes that, he had actually picked up the mud of the place where the Jallianwala Bagh incident happened, which was spotted with the blood of those who were killed, and that he kept it in a vial and that he worshipped it every day. So this is one of the stories that does the round. How true is it?
No, I think for me, the question was that what does prompted a 12-year boy to go to Jallianwala Bagh? It is, and then I found that in our own family, there was one branch who got into the government job and finally became pro-Britisher, had a lot of land and other things. And he will always come because he's a relative. He will come and sit and will try to raise the issue. And to Jallianwala Bagh, his response was that, oh no, government cannot do this. It must be a mischief done by some of these satyagrahis that they have to respond like that. That it is, and Bhagat Singh said that I'm hearing the other side of the story because that verbal news were coming that a lot of people have been killed. And I say one of the first lesson which his grandfather actually gave him was that don't believe on one side of the story. Try to find the real truth. So he is in search of a truth. A 12-year-old boy in a martial, well, virtually there is a curfew, and I don't know how he walked into there. And it is a fact that he went there, brought the blood-soaked soil, and because my mother was very eagerly waiting for him at home, and she said that, well, I have some mangoes for you. He said, no, today I'm very, very annoyed that can a foreigner be so cruel that a full without that there is a people who are peacefully gathering and they just kill them, and there is a lot of so that was his experience, and that was which makes him a boy which is anxious to find the truth, and that is his training also. So Jallianwala Bagh, and then that is why I say he learned from Jallianwala Bagh that it was the unity of the people which threatened the British bureaucracy, that they went to that cruelty, that will teach a lesson so that they don't get together and become a threat for us.
Okay. So, Professor, Professor Jagmohan, Bhagat Singh was in school, but he was in Lahore when the Jallianwala Bagh incident happened in Amritsar. So did he come all the way from Lahore to Jallianwala Bagh to Amritsar for this?
No, because that is the Jallianwala, that is Amritsar and Lahore were well connected by railway. So he must have come on rail, dropped there, and he's a just innocent young boy. Mother could sneak in through all the securities and go there. We can imagine that, but he did go there and have that, and that is also that once you are determined to know what is happening, well, he reached there.
Right. No, it's amazing. Even if I read Bhagat Singh's essay on why he was an atheist, and also went through his jail diary. So his thoughts are very, very evolved for his age. He has the maturity of a much, much older person, the knowledge and the learning of someone who's experienced a lot more than what he at his age. Okay, so we'll come back to the questions surrounding some of the myths around Bhagat Singh and his life.
No,
So
I would like to add here, because when we are going through the evolution of Bhagat Singh into that why I'm an atheist is the last evolutionary stage of him. Prior to that, there is interesting things. That when Jallianwala Bagh happens, then British administration excites a mahant of the birthplace Gurdwara Nankana Sahib, the birthplace of Guru Nanak. And they massacred 149 Sikhs inside the Gurdwara. And Bhagat Singh went there on 4th April because this was on 21st February 1921 that it happened. And Bhagat Singh goes there. And one of the picture which was actually there, that the leader of that we call Jathedar, he was sitting at reading Guru Granth Sahib, and he was killed at that while he was reading Guru Granth Sahib, and his blood falls on the Darbar Sahib, what we call Darbar Sahib, the Guru Granth Sahib. And Bhagat Singh said that means he is not only plundering the material wealth, but he is also doesn't want people to read the message which is there in the Guru Granth Sahib. And it is the age of 14. And he start learning Gurmukhi because that was not taught in the school. He self-learned Gurmukhi to read Guru Granth Sahib and understand what messages gives. Because my mother also started, and that's another period in which there is a lot of protest after Nankana Sahib. And I always say that maybe British thought that another similar type of massacre will make people forget that this is a natural course of a strife that this happens. So they wanted to dilute Jallianwala Bagh's effect. But Bhagat Singh, after reading Guru Granth Sahib, after some time, and that's why mother told me that he came and just questioned me. Bibi Amro, because Bibi is a respectful word for the. So he said, "What are you reading?" She said, "I'm reading a selection out of few selected parts of it." He said, I've understood what is the message in that. And that is a wonderful thing, that he is able to discover that in Guru Granth Sahib, the shlok, we call them, or the which are imbibed at the end of it by Guru Gobind Singh, were the verses sent by Guru Tegh Bahadur before his martyrdom. And the last part of that is a Guru Mantra, that if you understand this, you will be able to do and face the world better. And that is in Punjabi, ke bal shutkyo bandhan pade, kishu na ho tapaye. That if you are powerless, then you are a bondage, you cannot do anything. But then to illustrate that, a story from the Upanishad is Nanak kahe, Hari ke haath mein jaise gaj ko hue sahay. That is, it is in the hands of the Almighty, as in the story of elephant and crocodile struggle, which is that both powerful persons are fighting, but then you cannot do it except that you pray. So, but his answer is very powerful. The next verse says, "Bal hua, bandhan shoote, sab kuch ho to paye." That if you empower yourself, then you can liberate yourself. And then Nanak, tumre haath mein tum hi sohe sahay. That is, if you are empowered, then you can free yourself from the bondage, and then you are not dependent on anybody, but this is in your own hand, and you become your own supporter. Bhagat Singh said, that means the lesson to be learned out of this is that we must empower ourselves. And empowering is that we must overcome the weaknesses of ours. And that is a wonderful message which is evolving, as we were talking earlier, into Naujawan Bharat Sabha and others. So he is that capability, which we call that Saraswati has rides on the that Hans, and Hans picks up the diamonds out of the mud. So that's a type of attitude which Bhagat Singh had. And in the meantime, let us also have another incident which he had, because he adopted Kartar Singh Sraba as his, that he is taking inspiration from Kartar Singh Sraba, who is the youngest revolutionary to be hanged. And Kartar Singh Sraba leaves Punjab, studies in Odisha, and is class fellow of Netaji Subhash, and goes to America and establishes that Gadar Party Center with Lala Lajpat Rai, and becomes so that whole experience, because he came to meet Sakeshwar Singh, father of Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh was at the age of 9, and he saw that young man and learned about his stories. And then later on, as we recorded from my great grandmother, his Bhagat Singh, she said that he will always show me that photo and say, here is my philosopher, my guide, my friend. And that's how inspiration comes to you, and you try to follow that model which is there. So this is the formation of Bhagat Singh in that. As we say, we are wonderstruck that how but once he decides, and about his growth of mindset, and particularly his determination, he says, because up to Kokori case, he said that we were just receiving orders and doing job. We were not thinking ourselves. But once Kokori case taken, let me tell to our audience that Kokori case is the first revolutionary party which called itself Hindustan Republican Association. They were preparing for, and they had a lot of persons with the knowledge, with understanding, like Ram Prasad Bismil was a good writer. He wrote on Mother Catherine, he wrote on farmers' problem, he wrote on Kamal Pasha. So they are studying the word history also and finding characters out of that. And then his autobiography is a very good document that towards end he says how to proceed further. His colleague or closest friend, co-patriot was Ashfaqullah, Rajinder Lahiri. Bhagat Singh was so much impressed by Rajinder Lahiri's knowledge and understanding that his younger brother was born in 1926 and he names him Rajinder in memory of his Kakori people's, that Kakori martyrs memory. So that's a cumulative fact, and also learning from your failures and unsuccessful efforts into that. And then he writes that after Kokori case, and this is written in Why I'm an Atheist, and let us understand that Why I'm an Atheist is an autobiographical note of how he evolved his thinking and came to a conclusion that young men must be having self-reliance or they must not try to find something to support them, because he says that like a person has a stick to support, so when he has to face the crisis, he will not stand on his legs but try to shift the weight to that. And that is why he says that don't try to have self-confidence, have self-critical analysis that you can understand. And that is where he says that I wanted to study, so that the argument of our by the enemy can be answered by an argument. So that's a part of growth. And here he writes that study started ringing in my head, so that we can understand what is the experience. And that is why he starts studying the Ireland. He studied the American, because America, being the first colonial colony which liberated itself in 1776. So they were trying to find that how do they defeated the British, what can be learned from there. And particularly in that phase, there was a socialistic new version of socialism, that equality, but with individual liberty, was coming up over there. So this is a mental evolutionary growth period in which he reaches that decision, which we call Why I'm an Atheist. But there is another very interesting thing. That is, he says that this is my culture, or everybody who has to become revolutionary must have self-convincing and scientifically see the things. But there is another article which is headlined "The Indian Independence Movement and the Question of Religion." In that article, he says that how to deal with this question of religion in society. And it is really interesting that he quotes Tolstoy, telling that that Tolstoy says that there are three layers to the religion, and the first layer is the philosophy, and mostly people are interested in philosophy and doesn't create strife because of that. Then the second part is the human values, to keep a good social connection with each other, and that values are equally the empathy, that you take care of your neighbors, you must help each other, you must be sensitive to the society. And these are the common values of whatever stream of religion you say, so that there is no strife in that. But the third thing which creates problem is the ritualism, because once they get into ritualism and forget about the other two parts of it, then they struggle on that. And that's very interestingly illustrated in their manifesto of Naujawan Bharat Sabha. So that I think he has a public approach to religion and a personal approach to religion. So I am an atheist is his own personal commitment, and I think that is also what we try to find later, that there was a book which he sent from the jail, which was an autobiographical note, and maybe this was that autobiographical note because it got published in the People that magazine in 1931 itself. And that was in September 1931. It was originally reproduced because these were some of the documents which were with the father of Bhagat Singh, Kishan Singh. He brought them into public domain through that.
It's very interesting. I also read somewhere that he was of the opinion that none of the revolutionaries should address each other with any religious greeting, so no Sat Shri Akal, no Ram Ram. And he was against those kind of greetings as well. He believed in saying Bharat Mata Ki Jai, or, just talking about the country and revolution. So that was also one of the things that I read about.
No, there is an interesting thing with what you raised, this very interesting question, that if you find Gadar party, their identity is not religion. Their identity is their village. You will find everybody Kartar Singh Saraba because he belongs to village Saraba. So village as a community is there. But when British wanted to put them into, then they try to find their castes. In Bhagat Singh's or Naujawan Bharat Sabha movement, they didn't add anything to their name. And it's very interesting that Sukhdev never wrote Thapar with him. And I found it very interesting that his cousin brother, Jayadev, they were two cousin brothers who were in the same metric examination. They passed the metric together. And he, in that metric result, he writes Thapar with him, because he is still not that conscious that, but Sukhdev never writes. So you are very right that these caste identifications, Bhagat Singh never, until he had one letter and he wanted to conceal his identity, he wrote as B.S. Sandhu. Otherwise, he never used that word, which is now being imposed. And this casteism is also, this is which the Britishers wanted. Now, well, you go to Canada and America, they would like to put you family name. And we don't have a family name, we have our tribal name. So these are tribal names which caste, and then within that caste, which tribal you are. So they wanted us to go to, and the Naujawan Bharat Sabha, and that is why Ranbir Singh is Ranbir Singh. Though he belongs to a so-called Hindu family, but with Sikh traditions. So that was evolving culture into a unified Punjabi culture in which they were bringing up themselves, and also learning from their past. Bhagat Singh never rejected, but he learned from that what lesson do we take, and that can help us develop into a new or young people.
Yeah. Sir, regarding one of the myths, one of the things that Bhagat Singh is frequently associated with is this, Mera Rang De Basanti Chola. What is the history behind this phrase, and how is it associated with Bhagat Singh?
It is associated by the films.
Oh.
But historically, Basant is a time when new things come up. Even Mir Khusro was so fascinated by the flowers of mustard that he only offered those flowers to his guru, Nizamuddin. and he wrote a poem. So Basant, on one side, Basant as a festival of season is the coming up of the new waves or new thinking. So that's one part of it. The second part was that this actually, the Basant day came in when the court case of Kakori was going on. And they thought how to celebrate Basant. So they made an arrangement that all of them will have the handkerchiefs around their neck, which will be of mustard color. And then Shaheed Ramprasad Bismal just had this song uttered there. That and another interpretation is when they say mera rang de basanti chola, because when do people find that? Because that is when you abdicate your worldly duties and you come to serve the society. Because when somebody leaves, so this was symbolizing that. But unfortunately, we never try to understand that symbol. That Basant is the coming up of a new era or a new life, because everything starts coming up with this new leaves, new flowers, and that color. And then we have to make a distinction that yellow is not, well, kesari is different. It's a reddish tinge. Yellow is purely lower rating, which is more blackish tint. And the Basanti is a, like you had a Basanti shirt today. That's interesting. So that history is, yeah, but this significance is that Basanti represents a new, and how good after the winter, when you come into Basant, and we say that a new, the whole winter has gone, a new life has started. So it represents the coming of the new era, or a new weather, or a season in which everything starts growing up. So that was actually Kakori people's, that is Kakori comrades or revolutionaries' innovation of celebrating, so that they show that how they are least bothered about what is going on, because they understood that British will decide. And that's what later on Bhagat Singh put it more practically, that they have to do their job and they would not listen to your logic, because they become illogical when you have to remove your whoever you think as enemy. And that is being repeated in everywhere in the history and in every era. So that way, the Basanti should be taken with that understanding, that it is the welcoming the new change which is coming up in the whole vegetation, and that also shows a new change. You are coming out of winter into a new thing. So that way, but it is historically, it happened in a Basant day of when the Kakori courts proceedings were going on.
I personally love yellow and Basanti as well. So, also we have about only 4 photographs of Shaheed Singh that are usually, you see them all over social media. They're everywhere. That is how Bhagat Singh is primarily represented. And in none of these, I think, is he wearing yellow pagdi or a yellow safa. So, but how come that, he's shown wearing this yellow pagdi? Did he ever wear a yellow pagdi? Why is this color associated with
it? That is why I say that you have a Basanti. Basanti is a green and yellow mixed up. Your shirt is Basanti, not yellow.
Yeah, yes.
If we take out the green out of it, it becomes yellow. If you add red to it, it becomes kesari. So,
right.
So we should learn that how nature is so much in its plenty. And now it is an artist, if artists want to show him that he is bringing out a new change, he will put Basanti color. It is we unnecessarily are trying to make it that no, to me it looks yellow. Where I would ask that person who put it that show me what is the difference between the colors. We have so much variety of colors in the nature, and every color represents something. Yellow is taken as sickness. Your face becomes yellow because when you lose your blood. So and Kesari is one which is adopted by sannyasis. So to see everything that is one of the my thing is that more important is than the color of his turban. More important is the vision of Bhagat Singh about it. So whatever, if a picture, what does it give? Even if you see original, what does it tell you? It is black and white. It is right that normally white turban was born, and now it will be associated with some other type of political thought. And why? Because why this Akali started later on here, and there is like I was talking about Nankana Sahib. Post Nankana Sahib, there was so much of protest that people started wearing black turban as a protest, black chunni headscarf of the woman is black. And the word used was Kaliye. That is Sikh became, now or Punjabi became synonymous with black color as a protest. But that was the protest which was against such a massacre which took place at the birthplace of Nanak. So that is, and now later on they became Akali and they became blue. They adopted blue color, which has its own history of a kind of group. So they have also have different. So I think the focus should be shifted. Instead of these, artists should have the liberty. He want to create, but that is our eyes. Do we understand what the colors mean? And there is very interesting. Annie Besant has written a book on what colors mean. And there is a diagnosis which is made by the Russians, which is a color therapy. That if you want a particular color will generate a particular kind of feeling in you. But if you understand it. So to me, that is an unnecessary debate. And why I brought that 4 photographs together, it was scattered. Because when there was a debate that Bhagat Singh should be represented by hat, because mostly a post assembly case, he was represented by hat because that is how people knew. You will go anywhere in India, you will find Bhagat Singh in hat. And if hat is there, it is taken as Bhagat Singh. Like if you take the specs, it is Gandhi. So it is further symbolization. But then some kind of criminalism came that no, we want him to show to a young Punjabi, so put a turban on him. I said, this is evolution of Bhagat Singh from 12 years to 16 years to 20 years, 21 years. These are the 4 photographs. And if you see an evolution of Bhagat Singh, you will know. And after that hat photograph, he comes up with down with imperialism, long live revolution. And that is his total synthesis of his message. So I think this was a very, these days, lot of controversies raised on that. But I say that let us talk about vision, because he is a visionary. Well, Baba Sahib Ambedkar is a visionary.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but what was the significance of wearing a hat? I mean, he cut off his hair.
No. There is a significance. Let us talk about that also. You have raised a very interesting question. Why did he go with wearing a hat and taking with him only American-made pistol? We never correlated that. Because the American challenge to the British was on his mind, that he must show his, and also created a kind of contradiction, which was later on explained by the Home Secretary, Mr. Emerson, because when Jinnah asked him, well, who are Europeans? These boys are saying that we were kept as European in the European world in Delhi, but once they have been the sentence has been given to them, so they are sent to the normal criminal ward. What is the difference? He says that those who wear European clothes are to be treated as Europeans. And that is what Bhagat Singh made, and his comrades made an argument that we are political sufferers. We must be at least a criminal, European criminal will be given a better treatment. Is a racial discrimination within the jail also. And that became actually the major issue on which they built up that whole hunger strike period. So that way, hat represents a particular type of American image. And a hat, well, at that time, people used to wear the half pant along with the shirt. And shirt, he says, is a Shakespearean shirt. And incidentally, my mother has kept that shirt which he wore when he went to the assembly. So hat has its own, and that is why it is a unique also. Has anybody other with hat used, except somewhere some military person must be there. So it is a virtually giving that argument that I am going to face and appreciate that his colleague B.K. Dutt, what was the age of B.K. Dutt? He was 18 and a half. So they were so mature, so confident that we can talk with the British system, bureaucracy, and are capable of addressing their those arguments by argument. That is, dalil se dalil ka jawab denge. So that is evolution. If we understand this, we will appreciate it. Otherwise, to us, without like color, without understanding what had, and that is why he carried with him the American pistol, and that pistol was which Ghadar party has brought in 1915 when Ghadar was being organized, and that was inherited from there to this group. Otherwise, all their other arms were the Western British arms. So that's also significant to me, that he uses as a symbol the arm which is as a historical process, the liberation of America from the British colonial liberation is somewhere represented there, because most of the literature he studied was the British American literature, and most of those authors like Sinclair will always be found in this hat. So I think that is to be, we have to go deeper to understand the significance, and later on it becomes symbol for us. But the most important is that the difference between a statue or a symbol is the essence of it. So once we understand the essence, and that will be reflected in his writing. If you deeply study his writing, it reflects into it. That is there. So that is his choice, whereas B.K. Dutt doesn't use that, but he chooses that so that a American liberator face could be put before the Britishers.
Very interesting. And it's also very interesting to note that his father and his uncle were also part of this Ghadar party that you're speaking about. And this is not common knowledge. Not a lot of people are aware of that. And of course, he grew up in a very revolutionary environment with a father like that. And, like you said, the evolution of Bhagat Singh, all of this can be taken into consideration when it so thank you so much. There are a few questions that people, put up on social media.
And would you give me the time to explain that how these four generations were actually, what motivated four generations to constantly stay?
Of course.
For independence, because that's important. Because Khatkar Kala is becoming now important place by our current Prime Chief Minister going there and taking oath there. So it has become virtually internationally. But I say that Khatkar Kala is not important because it's ancestral village of Bhagat Singh. but it is important that it produces 4 generations of people who stood against the oppression and for the people's cause. And the basic which I was trying to find out, search in my family documents, with that what is which motivates them. Like his uncle Sajid Singh, he gave us an autobiographical note before his death at 15th August 1947, after having traveled for 37 years in the whole of the world for preparing people for independence in different modes. He says that his grandfather made him, well, that is interesting, that his grandfather told him that when you have to choose between property and principle, you choose principle, not property. And it is interesting that this argument is modified by Bhagat Singh in a discussion with his father, that when I have to choose between life and principle, I will choose the principle, not life. So that is one basis on which the 4 generations, and the great-grandfather Fateh Singh says, I will tell my coming generation that they must be very clear, because that is the message of Guru Gobind Singh, that you stand with those who are fighting for their rights, number 1. Number 2 is that ancestral house, which was actually, though it was a very small property, but it was taken as a part of the control by Sarjan Singh. And in every summer vacations, he will bring Bhagat Singh and his elder brother, till he was alive, to Khatkar Kalam, to tell them that why this house is important. It is not just a house, but it is important because it was built in 1858, post First War of Independence. And they said, he named it that this is our Diwan Khana. So there was argument that why you are preparing this new house and area when the whole village can meet in your Haveli. He said, when you come to my Haveli, you are not able to take independent decisions. You only look for in which direction the Baba's finger is pointing. So I want you to sit together, delineate your problems, and once you delineate the problem, you will give a solution. So governments will come and go, nobody will address your problem. That is a wonderful message which is given in that house. So that way, these are some basic things. The third one is, my mother got his right of survival, because those pro-British family was also known as a girl killer. Because feudal families, and his grandfather was trying to liberate them out of that. And my mother got the right, and you see the conjecture. His younger uncle, Saswan Singh, dies 20 days after she is born. It is the same July month, but the grandfather names her Amar. It doesn't signify that life is immortal. And the girl, and there is a very small story which is left, because Bhagat Singh's thoughts are mostly frozen because of his young age. And so I met an old lady, very close to our family. And she said that Bhagat Singh was young, three years or so. So I just tried to tease him that with a long sigh, oh, Bhagat Singh, you have got a sister? Well, he said, how does it matter? If you have 4 annas, we will silently marry her sitting inside the house. And if we have money, we will go on the top of our house with all the music and the other thing. We will marry her that way. So what is the difference? So that is how the family values were also. And another very important is that the very first practically removal of casteism was done by his grandfather. And there was a lot of revolt against it, because there is a feudal thinking and there is a liberating thinking. So these are values which actually gave and are the base also on which Bhagat Singh is evolving his own thinking, experience, and all that. And very interesting thing, I just saw Ajit Singh writes in his autobiography, and I was wonderstruck that my father taught me Gulsta and Bosta. This is the two very important books of Sheikh Saidi. They are in Persian. That when I was even still in the middle classes, my father taught me that, and this is rich of humanism. So you see, well, how the values are inculcated, and that becomes the basis of a revolutionary passion later on, and evolves into. And Bhagat Singh did his own homework also, and that is what we find that in the jail notebook, it is not a first reading of those books. It is a rereading because he got that after hunger strike, what he found was or achieved was that he can ask for any number of books. He can take notes on that, which you talk about, that jail notebook. And the very first, he has a two English quotation that my strength is the strength of the oppressed, my courage is the courage of desperation. So by achieving that notebook, the very first thing he feels is, okay, this is my strength. My courage is the courage of desperation. उसका मतलब है कि मिट्टी जो है वो गर्दिश में है मेरी तपश से, मैं वो मजनू हूँ जो जिंदा में भी आजाद हूँ. That means I have that spirit, that atomic energy, and that is where the science talks about it. कुर्रे खाक है द गर्दिश में तपश से मेरी, मैं वो मजनू हूँ जो जिंदा में भी आजाद हूँ. As we find in science that every small particle of sand has atomic energy. It can be converted into atomic energy. He said that heat or energy is in me, that even in the jail, I am free. Freedom means you are free to read, write, and think. They cannot close your mind. And that is why the last couplet which he wrote was, which to Sir Kultar Singh, that couplet was, मेरी हवा में रहेंगी ख्याल की बिजलियां, ये मुश्ते खाक है फानी, रहे रहे या ना रहे. That what remains after me is my thoughts, and they will always be enlightening. And that is what they do today, that we are getting enlightened by his thought process. And the second is that I am just a handful of soil, and I will be disappear, but my thoughts will continue coming. So that is a interesting part of Bhagat Singh's evolution. And one last thing, that his last messages are very important. My mother was 20-year-old, used to wear khadar, and to her said, Bibi, the simplicity is very good, but you must be very strong in your views and ideas, determination. And that is what she lived all the time. To your one younger brother, Kultar Singh, who was 12 years, he said that remember 3 words. They are that take care of your health, never feel discouraged, and try to study with hard work. That means by understanding what is you're reading, and never get disappointed if you're not able to succeed once. And health virtually means that you must take nutrition and exercise. So that's so simple. And Kulbir Singh, his message is with one more dimension added to these 3 dimensions. सेहत का ख्याल रखना, हौसले से रहना, मेहनत से पढ़ना, these 3. And then he adds that because you are now becoming grown up, you must learn some work by doing hand. Because if you have something capability of doing something by hand, you will be able to feel confident, and you will be able to help father also. So you're not dependent. So I think these messages itself is what his I think vision for the present generation and maybe for future generations also till that complete independence is achieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jagmohan. I think we all agree that Shaheed Bhagat Singh had a beautiful mind. And that line that you spoke about, the courage of desperation, to appropriate desperation to courage. I mean, that's amazing. So it takes a special kind of mind to think like that. And I think that is why the legacy of Shaheed Bhagat Singh, it stays on. And that is the mystery behind his whole persona and his mind. We're still trying to delve into the mysteries of how he used to think and what shaped his thoughts. And it's beautiful. This conversation has been so interesting so far. There are a few questions that people have sent to me as well. Most of them are very political in nature, so I don't know how comfortable you will be.
They need to be answered. Every question need to be answered.
So I'll just open the questions and maybe we can go through them and you can decide which ones you want to answer and which ones you want to answer.
Every question will be answered. No question should be left unanswered.
How tough is it to live as a family of a legend when ideologies have changed so much and people have very different agendas today? So
actually, there are two aspects of it. One is that you feel a kind of emotion being part of that tradition. And the second part is there is a responsibility. My mother very silently put a question into my mind. Whenever she will bring a book on Bhagat Singh or some publication somewhere and hand over to me, and politely she will say that people are asking me the question, is there anybody in the family who knows Bhagat Singh? That question told that he will be my relative, or I can claim his relativeness relationship if I know him. And there are very interesting experience in knowing him. One of that was that we met Nalnikshore Guha at Mirzapur. He had come all the way at the age of 95. He has come all the way from Calcutta. And Nalnikshore Guha was one of the close comrade of Arbindu Ghosh, who brought the movement, the first awareness of the freedom movement or the revolutionary consciousness. And I had a feeling that Bhagat Singh, because he's my relative, he looks to me great. Is it because of that subjective feeling, or there is something objective that about him? And I say that this is the best person to whom I can ask to clear my doubt. So I asked him that if on the parameter of sacrifice, people have seen there are number of people from Bengal who have made sacrifices much steadfastly and strong. If it is on the terms of ideas or thought process, there are so many strong minds which has been produced by Bengal. But what is the importance of Bhagat Singh? And the reply was actually discovery of Bhagat Singh for me, because when I collected his writings, I found that is the stream. He says, in the beginning of the 19th century, we were frustrated because nothing was moving. We come to understand that our poverty is because of the exploitation by the British, taking away the money from here, and the poverty of the peasantry is even after all good conditions of the land, water, there is some part that they are not able to have sufficient work for their hand. So he said, but it was not moving. Instead, British divided Bengal into Hindu and Muslim Bengal. And we have to fight against the unification of Bengal. And then at that time, there was a lot of depression, which was taking away the young. So to break that depression, our young people have to come and make sacrifice, like young people like Khudiram Bose, Kanhaiya Dutt, and so many. But he said that find a difference. When Bhagat Singh and his colleagues or co-patriots or comrades started in the freedom movement, they were motivated by the love of their people. So the love is the motivation. And that I find everywhere. You will never find any kind of frustration, because why you abuse when you are frustrated? Why you beat somebody who is weaker? Because you are frustrated. We beat our children because we are not able to answer their question. So he said that frustration, and I find that Bhagat Singh and his none of the comrades ever had a kind of jealousy or those factors which gives you that, and that can be found, and that is why while uh, in his statement to the session code, he says that we humbly submit to be serious student of history, the conditions of our people and their aspiration, that how to meet liberate them from those conditions, and that is what we talked earlier was inequality. So for me, or as a family member, it is definitely to keep oneself, at least I may not, but something I do wrong will be somehow it will lower Bhagat Singh's prestige. So to keep that, and the third part is more reading him gives you a lot more power to face odds. At one time, while Delhi riots were there, we brought out a report, and they came up with the standard that that type of that you are Deshdrohi. And I said that I'm doing my duty. Your constitution says that what duties are, and what I learned from the freedom movement. And that is what Bhagat Singh is another very interesting, that he says, I am a realist. That realist Bhagat Singh is to be found. It is not ideologies. Whatever ideology is temporary, it comes, and no ideology stays longer until it gives you its understanding. So he says that I'm a realist. My actions or actions of a revolutionary should not be measured by ethics. It should be measured by reality, that how much impact you are able to create for making the path. And a word used by him is that we are the vanguard of the broad national movement. So your question is that carrying that heritage is first is to keep oneself committed to Bhagat Singh, not going for any kind of, that is again that old saying that choose between the principle, then the property or the post. So when I never got into that, and my mother said, I will love you if you don't come to me for putting his farish, that I know everybody, but I cannot make any recommendation or beg for you. You achieve whatever you want. And that gave me the encouragement that I will be on my own. In engineering, I achieved what I could do, but I got promotions because of my work on my technical sides. And that is, I think they give us that you must have your self-confidence, do work hard, achievement will come. So that principle is which keeps you actually a lot more. You have to walk on the edge of the sword so that you don't do any kind of begging. So this is a big answer to that small question.
Right. So, but does it hurt you to have people call you anti-national?
Why? Because that report on Delhi riots, which is called "Who Are the Guilty?" Actually, well, we had established a Democrat right organization. I am for 40 years. I'm still the general secretary of that Punjab Association for Democrat Rights. So with PUCL, PUDR, we actually made a on-the-spot study that what really happened in that riots. So now it is again being put blame on one or the other, but there were 200 people who were named in that. And we thought that it is very important to take this, that it is not a Hindu-Sikh clash, but it is an organized gangs which has worked, though maybe by one party or the other. And nobody was free out of that. So we took that and immediately translated it into Punjabi and circulated in Punjab so that Punjab could be saved of any kind of strife. So and that this the government get annoyed that why we are trying to educate the people on the real facts. So they came up with that, but they never had the courage to come up with that. These days, it may be difficult.
Okay. So I'll ask you one last question because Anand has told me that we are about to run out of time. Does it dishearten you that, or do you feel that Bhagat Singh did not get his due, or are you happy with, whatever is his legacy that stays on and what people say about it?
That is why I say that let us understand Bhagat Singh's vision. And there is a very important document of 2nd February 1931. And the balance which I find in him, that he drafts that letter within 7 days of Gandhiji's relieving from the jail and the talk of compromise starting. How scientifically to judge the events is very, very right there. And he comes up with the vision that if you want a complete independence, take it to the common man's benefit, then there is a few points which he has suggested. So later on, Netaji Subhash carried out that because that letter was handed over to him and recovered by police in Calcutta. So that vision and the type, it is the how you can gain strength, clarity in your views is what we learn from him. And that is why these days my more emphasis is what do we learn from him? Not going into other things, but that's and it is virtuous to live by because he could delineate things very clearly that how to make your actions. And once you are committed, he wrote, his friend, closest co-patriot, Chindranath Sanyal wrote his first biography in May 1931. And he had two quotations that Bhagat Singh used to narrate us again and again, that Gandhiji is a philanthropist, but philanthropy doesn't bring social change. You need a scientifically oriented social dynamic force to bring a social change. That social change is what he says is a revolution. And the second part of it is that that is what I say, that let us concentrate and try to put the people with his vision. We can talk about that, how does his vision work. And there is a last word that I found two words being repeated. That is being repeated in Netaji Subhash writings also. And when a young age, he say, I want to be a complete man, a complete human being. And what that complete human being is, who understands the history. And understanding the history, he says, is understanding the laws of history. Because history is not chaotic. It is not, it moves by its own law. And secondly, say that you have be master of what is happening around the world. It is not just that what is happening here. And then by these two powers of your understanding, you will be able to predict what type of future it will be. So, and that is the last message which Bhagat Singh's uncle Sajid Singh gave on 14th of August 1947, that young men be complete persons. So there is a continuity, and Bhagat Singh is a complete person who could predict what is going to happen and why it is going to happen. He knows the laws of history.
Thank you. Wonderful. That's a very interesting insight, understanding the laws of history and predicting what's going to happen in the future based on what has happened historically, which is why it is so important to read, which is what Bhagat Singh always did. Mm-hmm. And then that led to him writing and leaving so much for us to ponder upon. So thank you so much, Professor Jagmohan, for having given us your time today and for having been so candid and direct in your answers to us. I think a lot of people, especially the youth, is going to benefit from, after having listened to your talk. And hopefully we'll edit it and put it out there for everyone to watch really, really soon. So thank you so much. And I will keep your number and save it. And I would love to read what you've written as well. It would be quite interesting to do that. And looking forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much, Professor Jagmohan.
Thank you, Leher, for your such a nice, wonderful interview, and also to Ranbir Singh Archives, and particularly Anand, for making this effort. And as you said, that once it is in the public circulation, let people come up with their questions then.
Yes.
Then we will have another session of answering, because every question by the youth must be answered.
Absolutely.
Because if it is not answered, then it will create problem. And that is what, as teaching of 50 years, I have learned, that until that questions come, because our narration will still be the narration, but once they have some question, and once that question is resolved, he will be more closer to Bhagat Singh than otherwise. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ranbir Singh Archives, and thank you, Anand. Thank you, Leher, for this wonderful experience.